welcome to another episode of Oneness Radio. I'm K-Man, and I'm with my host.
Hey, this is Ev, and this is episode 15.
Mm-hmm.
And 2 in 1 week. Smashing it.
Yeah, actually, the last 4, we've kind of been quite consistent, so I think we might be starting to enjoy ourselves, buddy.
Feeling the inspiration.
So, we kind of were talking before this started, and then it led into something, right? I guess we should start from there, right? And
Okay.
You were describing a video game to me, and I was like, okay, let's stop there and unpack that. So tell me about it again.
Yeah, so I was introduced to this game called Disco Elysium.
Okay.
It's an independent game, and aesthetically, it's beautiful. It has sort of like this film noir sort of feel to it, but with these great sort of negative colors, like film negative colors. It's amazing. Basically, the premise of the game is, or the main character wakes up in a hotel room that's been trashed, and it's clearly obvious that he's been on a massive binge. He wakes up not knowing who he is, right? And where he is and what he's doing. So as you slowly progress in the start of the game, you come downstairs in the hotel and you meet a police officer there. And this police officer is your new partner. And it turns out that on top of not knowing who you are and trying to figure that out, you have to try and solve a murder, right? And what's great about it is that it's actually a role-playing game, which I thoroughly enjoy. And so you get to choose, before you start the game, sort of what sort of stats you have, right? So you can choose between intellect or your psychological level, your physical level, or your reactionary level. And in each of those different categories, there are 5 or 6 different things that you can improve as you level up throughout the game. And what's interesting is that the way that the interface is that each of those different things are a different face and a different aspect of the main character's personality. And as you progress through the game, the more that you're proficient in any one of those areas, it will help you to unlock different dialogue, different interactions with different characters, and things like that. But what I loved most about how it's done is that those voices, in fact, talk to each other throughout the game, right? And it's just a really beautifully well-represented example of how the human mind works. So you have sort of these competing and conflicting and cooperative thought patterns that work together to develop a personality, right? Over time, let's say. I don't want to tell too much about the game because I don't want to spoil it for anyone out there who's a mad gamer. You should definitely check it out. But it's just one of those sort of independent masterpieces that you don't come across that very often in the gaming world. And you should definitely check it out.
Yeah, so the reason I stopped you there when you started describing it to me in conversation was because it kind of resonated with me about how it's kind of like we're all in that plight. You know, we woke up and we found ourselves here being a human being. You know, we were born into this world with no ideas at all in our head. But we have a body, we have a brain, and human faculties with which to perceive things. And we're given certain DNA, right? With certain, let's say, advantages compared to other DNA, or disadvantages, if you want to look at it that way, right? But we're given, you know, mental and physical attributes, right? Some might even say spiritual attributes. And we're kind of given this like baseline of this is where you're going to start in the game. And then it's a combination of your DNA and also the situation you're being born into, which is the parents or the life or your environment, the country even, the language, the culture, all those things, right? Are what you have to start with. And in that sense, you're kind of born into this game. And one thing that we kind of, we overlook this aspect of life, actually. With a lot of us, we'll say like, you know, well, this is the way things are. I'm like, yeah, but you were born into that culture and that way of seeing things. That's not how, let's say, you would think of things if you were born in this part of the world. That's when I look at like ideologies such as what's happening now in the world where, Islam is clashing with the Western world, so to speak. And we overlook the fact that we are both products of our environment and our culture and our DNA. And so if I were to just switch you at birth, you'd be on the opposite side of the argument. If I were to switch, like say, someone on that side of the world, someone on this side of the world had a baby at the same time, and I switch them at birth, right? Besides your DNA proclivities, like your physical attributes and stuff, your mental and emotional makeup would be quite similar, right? Your outlook, say, on life would be quite similar. Because you're born with nothing in your mind. And then you're at the mercy of your culture and your parents and the people around you to tell you what you should think about what's happening. What's happening won't change, but what you should think about that and how you should react to it and how you should process it and the meaning that you should assign to things, that's all kind of put upon you when you're born into this. You didn't choose that, especially in the first 7 years of your life, which we know are the most important for forming these worldviews. That's kind of put upon you. And when we overlook this, we're doing each other a great disservice and ourselves a great disservice. Because we're making judgments without taking that aspect of life into account. And if I'm going to judge someone without taking that into account, that judgment is invalid. It's invalid. It might be relatively valid to you, but if you're not taking that into account, then you're removing the truly inner child / innocent element that we all share. And when you do that, you are judging people, robbing them of their innate humanity. When you don't take into account that this was once an innocent child, and that child was conditioned within the first 7 years of their life to see things, and things were done to them and given to them and taught to them that was beyond their control, to make them end up thinking and seeing and doing things in a certain way. If you do not take that into account, your judgment is robbing them of their innate humanity. And that's what allows you to do such horrible things in your judgment.
Yes.
And so I would say to anyone judging in that way, right? I do not validate your judgment because your judgment robs someone of their humanity. And when you do that, you rob yourself of your own humanity. Understand that about what you're doing. And I don't say this to condemn or to be harsh on anyone out there, but of the few things that I must stand up for, it is this. Most of the conflict in the world, if not all of it, is happening because we refuse or ignore this key factor when we're dealing with other people and dealing with ourselves. And yet it's something we all share. None of us are immune to this. And yet we overlook it. So I would say to someone out there, take no step further in life until you've come to terms with and considered this. And that might rob you of your ability to harshly judge someone. That might rob you of your ability to finger point. That might rob you of your ability to blame. It might even rob you of your ability to actually judge someone. And it might force you to look at them in a different way. It might force you to look at yourself in a different way. It might force you to open up your heart. It might force you to reconnect and truly identify the inner child in yourself and all human beings. So if that's the wall you're holding up, I'm smashing it the fuck down. Because that wall is our destruction as a species. Because on the other side of that wall is our connection to our humanity, to our commonness, to our innocence, and ultimately to our own divinity. Smash that fucking wall down.
Yeah, it reminds me of this book I read by Yuval Noah Harari called Sapiens. It's quite a popular book. And he says that humanity at some point went through a cognitive revolution, right? And what this is basically what separates Homo sapiens from the other hominids and their ability to believe in the abstract. So where in Europe, when Homo sapiens were coexisting with the Neanderthals, at some point the Homo sapiens, being smaller in stature, but able to believe in similar things as other Homo sapiens, were able to wipe out the Neanderthals. And this comes from their ability, or our ability, let's say, to believe in things that aren't real, right? So this is in fact humanity's greatest strength and now greatest weakness. Previously, human society were only ever able to sort of live amongst a set number of other people, right? Based on family ties, connections, and levels of trust. So if you can live in a band of like 20 people, well, there's a high level of trust because you know everyone, you know their motivations, and you know their upbringing. And of course, as those group sizes get bigger, there's more and more people, and you know people less and less. So humans were able to develop higher levels of trust based on the fact that they can believe something similar to another human being. So if a group, one tribal group, would believe in the same, let's say, animal spirits as another one, then they have something in common that they can trust and have a closer connection to each other than another tribal band who may not believe in the same thing, right? So it starts to develop that sense of us and them. And then, of course, those pockets of trust continue to grow based on what we believe in. Religions grow, right? Or then nation states develop, or city states. And then you become that in-group because you all believe in the same thing. Well, I'm a quote-unquote Christian or Buddhist, right? So that allows me to trust in other people who are like me, right? And then now that we're in sort of a globalized environment, sort of one of the biggest globalized trust phenomena is money. So we all believe in money in some sort of way, although it's an ephemeral concept. It doesn't actually really exist. It relies on the belief of all of us in order for it to sustain itself. So where humanity has to go from this point, right? Because now, of course, we all live in these different nation states. We all identify with certain things. And so there's high levels of conflict at this point in our civilization. So as Cayman said, we have to start to dismantle and break down these mental constructs that we've created of separation from our fellow human beings and bring it back to the fundamental reality that we are fundamentally human. And that is our sameness. And that's where we develop those levels of trust through compassion, through understanding that this other person who relatively or typically I may be in opposition to is in fact just another person who grew up with a set of conditioning, a set of genetics, and a certain environment that happens to be different than mine, but that's of no fault of their own. Just like mine is of no fault of my own, it's just naturally arising. But I know through the deep introspection and understanding that I'm not those things, right? It's just a bundle of thoughts and concepts that I adhere to myself and others adhere to me to develop the sense of, this is Evan. I know I'm not that. And I know that other people aren't that. And it's that knowing, that lack of ignorance, that brings, that will and has to bring us together if we are to survive as a species. And of course, there's another level to that. And that's the fact that we are all one consciousness. But that's something that you can't rationalize and think out. That's something that you have to find within yourself and understand through experience. Gain that wisdom through experience, not by sort of mental gymnastics like we've just done here, right? Find the commonality in all things, not just human beings and not just living creatures, but in the entire universe. Find your commonality, your unity with that which is, and you'll break down all barriers.
Yes. You mentioned too how money is this thing that we all believe in. And before money, it was, let's say, religion and God. And before that, it was tribe. And these days, it's nationalism. It's believing in country, right? And all these things, to believe in this greater thing than yourself, right? And then you're saying there's another level to it. And I just want to, bring home that point. And that is that when it comes to things like money that we all believe in now, and because we all believe in it, it's a system of control. Because I know everyone believes in money, I now know that that's a lever I can use to control everyone and predict their behavior. If I can predict your behavior in relation to money, I can now start to use money to control your behavior. And if I know I can predict your behavior and I can control your behavior with the variable of money, I now have complete power over you. The same thing happened with religion. The same thing happened with nationalism. We've seen it happen over and over and over again throughout history. And it stems from the fact that the individual is not making the effort to know themselves as they truly are. And we will be susceptible to these forms of control over and over and over again without end until we address the issue of what we really are. Because we all believe in one thing that has led us to being controlled by all these other things, such as money, such as religion, systems of belief, nationalism, all these things. And that is the belief in our ego. Because we believe in our ego, we are now susceptible to control and manipulation by all these other things that I just mentioned before. But there needs to be an ego there, a sense of separated self from everything else, and to believe that that is you in order for all the rest of the stuff to work. And there's one thing that I'll say 99.99% of humanity all believe in, and that is we all believe that we are an ego.
Mm.
So you want to say that what that revolution that Homo sapiens underwent was our ability to believe in something that's not real? Yes, that's exactly. You hit the nail right on the head. We all started believing that we are egos. And that allowed us to other, and by othering, dominate other species on the planet. But the price we paid, quite literally, was our souls, so to speak. We made a deal with the devil. And it is that we, and like I was talking about before, to bring everything home now, is that you were born into this world as you are, as you were made, so to speak. Pure, innocent, not knowing. And yet something was there. And then you gained some kind of self-awareness of a I-ness that inhabits your body. It's like awareness of your body as separate from other bodies. Like a boundary around you where I begin and other things end. And then, once that is established, the conditions on what's inside this boundary and outside this boundary were then set by the culture that you were born into and the people. And also the way it interacts with your DNA, your underlying biological structures and potentialities. And so what you did from that point on is you created what this I was based on the environment you're born into. You say, well, okay, I guess I'm a man or I'm a woman. Okay, I'm black or I'm white or I'm Asian. I'm a Christian, I'm a Muslim, I'm a Buddhist. I'm a brother, I'm a sister. I'm an only child. I'm a happy child. I'm a willful child. I'm an independent child. I'm a curious child. I'm a stupid child. I'm a smart child. And all these impressions you're making upon this boundary psyche that you've created separate from other things, how you determine how all these things get let in and let out are based upon one basic fundamental need, and that is love. I say, okay, when I do this, I receive love. Or when this happens, it's accompanied by some kind of love or affection. And usually it's from parents that we need that, especially in our first 7 years. Because before we start forming ideas about how to do things, we're kind of a very emotional thing. We just need that love and want to feel safe. And if we don't get that, then we start to adapt our ego, our self, in order to get these things from life, right? And so we take a shape and think, this is how I'm going to get love to myself. This is how I'm going to feel love about myself. And so we create a personality in order to get this basic need out of life. But the whole thing is based in error because it's based on something we've created out of the world that we've been born into, as opposed to something that we are from the start. And so that self that we create cut off from everything, that initial separation is an extreme lack of love. And we have to fill now that void. Because once we're cut off and we're an individual, there is no longer that love that comes from union and connection with all that is. And that's very shocking to the consciousness that's cut off from everything else. This idea of it. It's like we took an idea or a piece of reality and we put a boundary around it. But in reality, nothing exists independently. Show me something that exists independently of anything else, completely. There is nothing that does so. But the idea of it is what we believed in. Something that wasn't real, that doesn't exist. And once we believed in the idea of this, and then we put selfhood into that, we gave our belief to it, there is an extreme hole, a cut-offness, like a pit of no love that we now have to fill. And we have to feel fulfilled. We have to fill that hole. And that's what an ego is. But it can never be filled because by its very definition, it's cut off. And so when this happens to us in our first 7 years, we become this animal that's formed with the one parameter, the one goal of trying to fill this hole or cover it over and protect it to get away from that sense of vulnerability that hole leaves in us. And the less love and validation we get during these years, the more of a, let's say, vicious animal we might become in order to get it. And then those things get covered over because we're in a society now where we have to act and be a certain way. And so those things get repressed into our subconscious as we go out into the world past those first 7 years. And they become unconscious personality traits that rear their ugly head every time we feel less than happy. And none of us are immune to this if we're believing that we're an ego. This is the human condition. And there's no way out of it except to stop giving your belief to something that's not real. Stop giving your belief to something that cannot be. Stop giving your belief to a separate self. You do not exist independently. Understand that about yourself. And let the walls come tumbling down. Inside your own mind, go within. And when something arises, say, I am that. Don't let there be space in your mind between you and what arises. Become one with it immediately. Those laws of space-time that are happening out here, like I can't become one with my TV out here, right? I can't do that. But in my mind, I can. There needs to be no space between me and what arises in my mind. And actually, if a thought of myself and a table and a baby arise in my mind, they're all arising within the same thing. And yet I'm setting up walls between them inside something that in itself is one thing, the mind. So suck the space out like a vacuum. And whatever arises within, be one with it. Don't turn anything away. And notice that there's no friction now. What can I be angry at if there's no two things? For me to be angry, for me to be happy, there has to be a subject and an object. And while I might be experiencing these things through the senses, the outer senses of my body, there is no actual thing that says I have to experience that thing mentally. I don't have to experience a subject and object on the level of my mind. You don't have to. It might be a habit, but you don't have to. And this might be difficult at first.
Yeah.
But like I said, there are many, many, many ways readily available out there on meditation to learn to go within this space and then learn to let go of the ideas, of the idea of separation from anything arising within yourself. And because you can outwardly be no more or less than an expression of what you are on the inside, when you start to let these walls fall down on the inside, outwardly, you won't be able to help but experience the expression of this beautiful inner unfolding. And it is higher and higher, deeper and deeper, wider and wider loving that will get us all there. To whoever's listening, love. 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 You're not alone. You can't be alone. You are never alone. Close your eyes. Take the world off. Be within your being. Putting aside the outward-looking senses for a while. And get to know that inner world. It's what you really are. It's what's constantly determining your outlook on the outer world anyways. It was once said, if you found a dirty cup on the side of the road, would you wash the outside of the cup and say, well, I guess it's good to drink from now? No, you would wash the inside of the cup. Because that's where you're drinking from. That's where you're sourcing from. And somewhere long ago, some dirt got into that inner cup. And that was the idea that you exist as a separate being. You need to go within and let go of that idea by whatever means arises to you that works for you. Don't let anything come up and say, this is me and that is that other. There needs to be no other within you. Because if everything is arising within you, it's all happening within you. That's the common denominator, is you. There's no needs for walls within. Become one within. Let nothing escape your love within. Whatever arises, love it and say, I am that. Yeah, come on in, come on in. And you'll notice that the mind will throw all kinds of things up to say, well, you can't be this, you can't be that. Love that too. Let it all go into that infinite compassion and let it dissolve in there as one thing. And breathe your way through it. Some things will be tough. Some things will be easy. Some things will be joyous. Breathe your way through it until all that's left is the love. So that as something arises with the idea of being separate, it's immediately absorbed into that oneness. So that nothing can fool you within anymore into thinking that it's separate from you. And take a deep, relief-filled, loving breath when there's nothing left but this love. And as one, look upon the world.
And I know that some of you listening may say, that's sweet for now, when I can sit down and listen and be still without distraction. But what happens when I go back to my daily life and I have to deal with people at work, people in my family, strangers on the street, and the emotional turmoil that is accompanied with those people? Just remember that this experience that you're having right now, this deep, peaceful experience, is also just arising, as those other things are just arising within you. It doesn't matter if you're feeling peaceful or stressed. You are that peace that encompasses it all. So take the time to build the necessary techniques in whichever way you feel best to remember that which you are. And you'll find that you no longer need to be in silence and stillness in order to know that which you are and allow it to arise naturally from you. You will begin to use the quote unquote negative experiences in your life to bring you back. You will use the self-deprecating dialogue within you to bring you back. When you notice those thoughts coming up, you can create the techniques that will bring you to stillness and show you that that's just arising. My reaction to it is just arising. My reaction based on my conditioning, or my response based on my mindfulness to that, is also just arising. It's all just you. None of it can exist without the awareness of it, like a dream. Your dreams have immense complexity. Entire worlds are created within your dreams. But every single thing in that dream, including the space, is made up of your mind. Just like in the waking world, every single thing that you see, taste, feel, smell, think is also made up of that which is. And is not separate from you. Like K-Man said, there is no subject-object. And you don't have to play out that human conditioning. See what you are. Continue to come back and realize that you're not continuing to come back. You are that which all that is happening in.
oneness. You made a great point there, in that, if I may sum up into a line, you are the one that is at peace with the entirety of experience happening everywhere. You are the one that's even at peace with you not being at peace.
Mm.
When I go through a day and I see that's bothering me, in one sense, I could take deep breaths and go, that shouldn't bother me because this, and there's no ego, and, there are spiritual sadhanas, practices, to bring myself into that calmness again. But there is also that which, when I find myself being bothered at something, I'm at peace with being bothered by something.
Mm.
Because the one that is bothered is the ego. It's kind of like an inner martial art where you only have one move. You have one go-to, and that's peace. And many sages and great spiritual teachers have spoken about yoga. And yoga is this union, and many people have experiences of this peace. But the sages and the masters say you must establish yourself there. So that your sense of self is resting in this peace and not moving about with the content of the mind, existing as separate things here and there, but resting in the whole, resting in oneness, resting in the peace. And it may seem like there's a back and forth battle happening all the time. But if you truly just keep doing, as Ev mentioned, going back, eventually there'll be a tipping point where you are established more in the peace than in the wandering. And then from that point of view, it'll no longer be you who wanders and comes back to the peace. You are the peace, calling all wandering back home. Come home. O prodigal sons and daughters, come home.
And it's in this space that you begin to realize the illusion of free will. So we all have this concept that we're free to do as we wish. We're free to choose as we want. But as we've been discussing throughout this podcast, if you are unconscious of what you are, all of your choices are made by your conditioning, be that genetic, familial, cultural. All of your choices are based on an infinite number of factors that you have no control in. And really, the only free will you have is to know that you're not that. Because until you do, you are a slave to those conditions and the unconscious patterns that have been created in your mind based on those conditions.
And I would like to point out that every time you judge someone based on those conditions, you further entrap yourself into this egoic condition. Judge not, lest ye be judged. Right? It's the worst thing you can do is to judge someone as an ego from the point of view of an ego. You further entangle yourself in it. This is why all the spiritual paths start with the discipline of detachment, the discipline of non-judgment, the discipline of letting things go, the discipline of turning the other cheek. Judge not, lest ye be judged. Forgive not 7, but 7 times 7 times. However you want to word it, you have to untangle yourself from the mess you're in by looking upon others and setting them free of any entanglement you would put upon them. Or forgiving our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Set others free of your judgment, and you in turn will be set free from your own ego imprisonment. Compassion, compassion, compassion. So I think this is a good place for us to call it a evening. Unless there's anything else you have to add, my friend.
No, that's it.
All right. This has been episode 15 of Oneness Radio.